We are finally previewing an actual real-life football game. Clemson goes to Duke on Labor Day to start the season. To help me preview the game, this is Calvin Kraft. You know him from Shakin the Southland. He publishes the game day or the game preview each week, usually on Fridays. And he's joining us here to talk about the first one. Calvin, thanks for joining.
Thank you, Ryan. Really glad to be here. Excited to talk some football.
Yeah, we've got real football to talk about. Before we really even get into Duke, let's just talk about Clemson. And what are you hoping to see from Clemson realistically? I mean, I know you want to see them win 100-0, but realistically, what couple of things do you have your eye out for in the opener?
Well, the biggest thing for me, I mean, and Dabo has alluded to this, like we got to throw and catch better and we got to defend and pass better. But offensively, again, I have such a bad taste in my mouth from the South Carolina game, watching them play cover one, cover zero, pretty much all game long, zero respect for Clemson's wide receivers and our inability to just take the top off of that, except for Bo. Bo got him once and Borey got hurt for like 50, 60 yards. After that, we couldn't beat it. And, and that's why, I got on Streeter about not throwing the ball in the second half, and I still think that was dumb, and we should have done it more. But when you're getting volume, but when you're getting those kind of looks at the line of scrimmage, and they're, you need to be able to throw it over their heads, and we just couldn't.
But they couldn't do it. So I
need to see that. That's the number one thing I need to see. Hopefully, Riley. I'm really hopeful he will, do a better job of scheming guys open. Or at least the system and their option routes or things that they do in this system lend itself to more, we got to beat people when they want to bring numbers up against the run. So explosive plays in the passing game, like we saw, the last we saw was when we had Cornell and Amari. I tell people, go back and watch the Pitt game that year. Even Ohio State, we lost, but I mean, Cornell and, especially we still were tearing up some press coverage and whatever in that game. We just played so bad on defense, it didn't matter. But, so that's my number one thing.
Yeah, and just kind of build off of that, I think, and I said it all last year, the receiver and the year before, I think the receivers were a big problem. And yes, DJ, especially at times, I mean, sometimes he looked great, but a lot of times he sort of disappeared. Syracuse game, second half of the South Carolina game. You could tell he wasn't going to complete a pass in the ACC championship game, and they yanked him right away. So he disappeared at times, but I just really felt the wide receivers just were letting him down also, and it was kind of a vicious cycle. So, Antonio Williams is good, and I trust that. I think he'll have a sophomore surge, not a sophomore slump, but there's got to be someone else. There's been all this talk about Adam Randall, and he was a big prospect. We didn't see anything last year. And for Bo Collins, as much as he gets talked about, he's been really good for stretches of like 5 games or fewer, never more than that. So let's see if the receivers could help Cade. Because I think we know that Cade can make some plays. The receivers could help him, and now he's got TCU was number 1 in the country in 50-yard plus plays. So he's got an offensive coordinator that can help him. Let's see if he's got the wide receivers. I think we're looking for the same thing there, but I'm especially looking for it specifically from the wide receivers. Let's go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's flip this over. So when Duke is on the field, when Duke's got the ball, what are you expecting to see from them and from our defense?
Yeah, well, Duke is a little worrisome offensively. They were pretty good last year. They were over 30 points a game. Riley Leonard is back. He's a solid, pretty good dual threat guy. I mean, he ran for 600 yards plus. He's efficient, doesn't turn the ball over. Granted, the only thing about him and that offense is they just did not see, other than maybe Pittsburgh, they didn't really see a defense worth salt, in my opinion.
No, you're right.
They beat up on Miami, but I was at Clemson for the Miami game. They were terrible. Clemson, we beat them mercilessly. They were not even competitive. So I don't put any stock in the Miami win. North Carolina.
No, I mean, Miami didn't make a bowl game. Their best win was Wake Forest. Their second best win was UCF. They lost to every other bowl team they played. So I have questions about how good they were. but the one thing you can't deny, I think, is that their offense was at least solid. Riley Leonard was a good passer. He had 2,967 passing yards, a pretty sharp 20-6 TD to interception ratio. He was their leading rusher with 699. He had 13 rushing touchdowns. He's back. You'd expect him to be even better. Top 4 wide receivers return: Calhoun, Moore, Higgins, and Pancol. They're all back. Jordan Waters ran for 566 yards, 8 touchdowns. He's back. And their offensive line is really, really experienced. They've got a 6th-year senior, 2 5th-year seniors, including a transfer from Stanford, a 4th-year senior, and then 1 redshirt freshman. So really experienced there. I mean, this offense could be pretty good.
Yeah, and one of those linemen is really, really highly rated that they got. So those types of teams concern you when you're Clemson, because usually Clemson's advantage in the front, the defensive front against the offensive line, makes the difference in a lot of these games. That they just can't block us. And but when teams can, like we saw with Notre Dame last year, when you can get us covered up front, and then our back end guy, and hopefully our back end, I expect them to be markedly better in the backs than last year, with all the safeties back, except for Venables. But Venables is probably like the 4th or 5th most talented.
Well, Venables, I'll give him an excuse. I think he was banged up last year, and now he's obviously out for the year.
He's a good football player, but
he was the worst rated safety.
I don't think he's better than Makuba. I don't think he's better than the rest of the Mickens. They're all
I mean, they're certainly the big 3 of Mickens, Makuba, and Phillips are I think without a doubt the best. And I heard something cool. I'm kind of partial now to Khalil Barnes. Evidently, he was coached by David Pollock over near Athens, and they stay in touch. And I listened to David Pollock's podcast, and so obviously was going to be pulling for the Clemson guy anyway, but doubly so pulling for Khalil Barnes. And let's not forget Sherrod Copeland. So I think the back end's be way better.
Oh yeah, much deeper at corner, much deeper. It's just across the board back in the back. I mean, last year he had to replace, Booth and Goodrich were studs and really were big parts of why the 2021 defense was good. And then you had, it took Wiggins a little bit to get going, and Sheridan was okay, but he was hurt.
Well, let's not forget the guy they were expecting to kind of rise up was Fred Davis.
Yeah.
Right. And
we saw that with corner, and the same thing that we see a little bit with wide receiver when you miss, because we don't take a ton of guys, we're selective. So when, we had a great hit rate through the stretch of the 2015, 2016, our hit rate was really high considering what we were signing.
Right.
And, you're not going to, we just had we missed on wide, the Latson and Ngata and that group did not work out the way it needed to work out. And then in corner, guys like, Davis, Malcolm Green's gone now. The guys like that we signed just, they didn't make super impacts for us. It left a hole. So that's why there was a hole last year. You had a veteran, only real veteran with any experience that we had in a corner was Sheridan.
Yeah. I mean, missing on Fred Davis ended up being a big deal last year. Now that Nate Wiggins has emerged, you've kind of filled that. Of course, Fred Davis is now transferred out. He's at UCF. So one last question on this side of the ball, then let's flip it over. I want to see, we talked about the defensive backs, but we also talked about how good Duke's offensive line might be. I want to see, do we have a problem at defensive end? Is Maskell actually better? How awesome is XT? Is he really going to have that breakout year? Get a shot here against a real offensive line. Let's see it. So I'm excited to see the DNs and, of course, the D tackles, but especially the DNs. Oh,
absolutely. XT healthy could be the difference in how far this team really goes, in my opinion. I mean, just a true screamer off the edge, which he is when he's right. Maskell, solid guy. Maybe he'll have a KJ Henry, Kevin Dodd type final run. That's best case scenario if you're Clemson fans, is that Maskell finds it. Or Malachi Goodman was another one that had a good kind of end of his it was kind of middling for a lot of it. So you never know. I mean, some guys, the light really comes on late And maybe for him, he hadn't been a bad player, but he hadn't been a difference maker.
Well, I try to balance my sort of commentaries. He hasn't had a sack since 2020. I mean, he hasn't been good. I'm not saying he's a huge liability, but he's a reserve level player. There's a lot of talk about how he's focused and he seems to be ready for a breakout, and I think that has some credence too. But I think we're so quick to say that we almost assume it. So I want to see it. Let's go ahead and flip this over now. And I think it's the side of the ball that people are more excited about for good reason. When Garrett Riley's offense with new quarterback Cade Klubnik is on the field, what are you expecting to see on that side of the ball?
This is where Clemson really, I mean, defensively, we should never be giving up 30 points to people defensively, in my opinion. Last year, all 3 losses, 30 points plus we gave up. We keep people under that number, we're going to win. We're going to win a lot of games. So this side of the ball, we really need to. This is where, I mean, Duke was middling on defense. They were better than the year before, but that's not saying much. They were terrible the year before that. They were giving up almost 500 yards a game.
Which is funny because Elko is a defense guy.
Yeah, well, Elko, now they weren't that bad last year. I mean, their number, they were definitely improved, but at the same time, I mean, they're not the steel curtain by any stretch of the imagination. They'll be at best a mid-tier defense from what
they're 68th in total defense, and they only return 60% of their production, whereas in offense, they return 82% of their production. So offense definitely seems like it'll be more formidable.
And so I took a look at what Kansas did with them when they play, because Kansas' system is similar in ways to the kind of thing that Riley does. I mean, all the offenses have their little wrinkles and changes, but that to me, and Kansas hurt them bad on a lot of stuff. And our ability to run, our running backs, Shipley and Moffa, we should be, like I said, we should force people to put 8, 9 down there, and then we throw it over their heads, and period. And we got a better runner at quarterback. So when, last year, I mean, DJ had some success running the ball, but I mean, to me, if you're a coordinator, you want to give him a keep read every time, because what's he going to do? I mean, he said he broke a couple of runs in his career, mainly because there was nobody within 20 yards of him when he got free. But you probably say, well, if he hits it, it's like 10 yards. If Ship or Moffa hits it, it's going to be 25, 30 plus. So you're going to pick your poison that way. Well, Cade can scoot. If he gets a crease like that, he can get you for 20, 30, 40, maybe more.
Right.
That's a different thing to think about when you're playing our zone read stuff, which I don't think that's going anywhere. If you watched TCU last year, they ran, Duggan ran a lot.
And I think it's important that Klubnik is up to about a little bit over 200 pounds, which I think is really critical because he was fairly skinny last year. And you want to run him and use his speed, but you need him to stay healthy. So I think him gaining weight is pretty critical. So my thoughts on when we have the ball, I mean, we talked about, I really want to see the wide receivers kind of prove themselves. This defense is okay. I'm not saying it's a junk defense or anything like that. But if Clemson's going to kind of, they put up 40 something against Georgia Tech in the opener last year, but it looked bad. It looked disjointed. This defense is a bit better than that, but I'd really like to see a performance where they look like a competent offense, not where they take advantage of a substandard defense, right? So I want to see them get off to a hot start, hit some explosives. That's kind of the promise of the Garrett Riley hire. And then that's when it opens up the running game. When you have to come down from the running game, you open up more explosives, and it becomes, from a vicious cycle to now like a virtuous cycle, right? So that's what I want to see kind of start in this game before you get your 2 tune-ups and then Florida State. So I'll flip back to you, but before I do, let's kind of zoom out here. So we talked about 9 wins, ton of respect for that. Also, they beat Wake Forest and UCF, and then basically beat up on bad teams. Lost at Kansas, at Georgia Tech. They lost at home to UNC in a really close game. Lost at Pitt. I think none of those teams, at times you might have thought some of those teams were good, but none of them really panned out to be good. I don't know how great you think Wake Forest is, but at the end of the year, they're sort of always bad. So I'm not sure how great this Duke team is. I have them right around 6-7 wins. They have home games against Clemson, Notre Dame, NC State, and Pitt. Maybe they steal one, but I'd lean against them in all of them. They have road games at Florida State, Louisville, and UNC. Maybe they steal one, but I'd kind of lean against them in all of them. So ton of respect for Elko. I think he was deserving of ACC Coach of the Year, but I think this is a 6-7 win regular season team as opposed to the 8-win team they were last year. So your overall thoughts on the game, your overall expectations of the result, and if you're willing, if you're ready, you can give a prediction.
Yeah, so one thing to note about Duke's defense is they were good at taking the ball away. So obviously any kind of upset scenario, like let's just take the South Carolina game last year. Clemson lost at home. That was an upset. Now South Carolina's got better personnel than Duke in a lot of places. But what's the formula for that? Well, Clemson turned the ball over twice on special teams and through interception. Later in the game, despite the fact that the 2 takeaways on the defensive end that offset that. So turning the ball over is a killer, especially when you do it. So Duke's going to need that. And their defense showed last year they can do it. And they have experience. They have 17 starters back total on, and Elko knows what he's doing. I mean, we've dealt with him. He gave us some. We beat up on those Texas A&M teams, but it wasn't like we were able to just run away and hide offensively either time against it. And then when he was at Notre Dame, obviously. Did we play them the year he was there? I
don't remember exactly when that overlapped.
But he's good. I mean, he knows what he's doing. He's good. He usually, when he was at Wake, before he left Wake, they were, people forget, they were like the flip. They used to have these low scoring. Their defense was and then their offense got good and their defense is not great now. It's kind of the other way around. But he can scheme up some stuff, but I really like the fact that we got. If I would be much more worried about this game if we were going there and there was Streeter and the system from last year.
Yes, and I just pulled it up. So he was at Wake Forest 2014 through 16. He was at Notre Dame only in 2017, so we didn't see him that year. And then he was 2018 through 2021 at Texas A&M. So I guess he was on the 2018 team. We played A&M in 2017 and 18, if I recall correctly. Is that right?
Yeah. So 18, we went down there and beat them, and that was when Trevor's first.
Yep, that's right. I remember his great pass to T. All right, it's prediction time. I'll give you mine first. So last year, Clemson beat Georgia Tech 41-10 in a game that didn't quite look right, and you didn't have your starter. You didn't get to turn over to the backups until way later than you wanted. I'm going to say this is 41-17, but Duke is better than Georgia Tech, and I think it looks better, and you get backups in, and so that score does actually tell the story, whereas 41-10 against Georgia Tech was kind of deceiving. It was starters pulling away late. So I think we leave this, it's a big win, big score, national audience. Duke's got more sort of cachet than Georgia Tech coming off 9-1 year. I think we leave feeling pretty good that Garrett Riley is getting things in the right direction, and this defense played decent or, pretty well against an offense we actually respect. So I think we leave this first one pretty happy. Certainly with a win, I think it's not too tight.
Yeah, openers are always, coaches talk about this all the time. Openers are tricky because you got the longest amount of time to prep. Now, for the first time in a while, though, we had a little bit on defense with West taking over, but really for the first time in a long time, teams are having to prep for our offense with really not a full idea. They have to watch TCU tape and then try.
We're the unknown. We're never the unknown.
Yeah. So we have a little bit of that. So I'm hoping that will lead to some stuff. But I'm always a little bit conservative with these opening games because, we might just not be. You just never know with game jitters and some guys. And we got some veteran dudes, especially on defense. I expect our defense to be, if they break 20 points, I'm going to be shocked. That's going to require turnover hell or some special teams kind of stuff going on, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I like that, but I just think we're going to have a healthy defense going into that game, and our top 11 on all three levels has got major difference makers on all three levels.
It does.
I feel better, much better about this defense. Now, I'm worried about depth now. If we lose a linebacker, I wrote about that. Behind our top three is guys that have not played. Same defensive end. Behind the top two, we got guys that have not really played.
Yeah, but even in that scenario, I think if you need an extra linebacker. I think Makuba's the extra guy, not linebacker, but extra guy there. You lose, let's say Maskell missed a series or something like that, or XT, God forbid, was out. I think Peter Woods is the guy. So you might not have – I'm also high on Kay Denhoff, so we'll see if that pans out. But I think you got guys at other positions that they'll have to kind of mad scientists move people around. But I think the guys are there, even if it's not at the position. So if you want to wait and make people read your article for your prediction, that's fine.
Time. You got another week. We got another week and plus of practice. So hopefully,
we're recording this.
No, nothing happens. But I mean, I think 40-17, something in that ballpark is kind of where I'd be leaning. It's kind of close to what you're saying. That might be, hopefully it's like way better than that, but it's on the road. Duke will be fired up. But the last thing I'll say about this, they have not played on that kind of stage with those kind of eyeballs. And Clemson has.
Yeah, if I look back at last year, funny enough, maybe the biggest stage they had was at Kansas, which
Kansas was getting going, but they were all like, "Oh yeah, Kansas hadn't lost yet." I mean, it was still like the fourth or fifth game, and it's not like this not Labor Day of the first full college football weekend with Clemson, and we've seen that. Dabo brought it up. You see the thing, Clemson draws. When Clemson's on TV, especially on this type of thing where it's the only real show, there will be a lot of people watching. And Duke's going to know that it's a stage that they're not used to. So we'll see how they do. I think it was a difference in the NC State game last year when they came to Clemson because they still had Leary. I mean, they were a different team when Leary was healthy.
That's so true. That 30-20 win at NC State last year was like a hyped up big time game. And I think that NC State team with those guys when they were healthy, the linebackers, the quarterback, that was a good team. That was a great win. But hey, let's end it here. I'll just say I think we win by 21 plus. But more importantly, I think we learn about the wide receivers and the defensive ends, and I think feel pretty good about this Garrett Riley offense. But anxious more so than the win or loss, which I feel pretty good about, is to see how good this team really is. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I'm just really, really excited. Really happy that Dabo did what he did. I thought it was super necessary, and it's really injected a lot of new. There's a real good vibe coming out of this camp, just from what I'm hearing. So I'm not like Mr. Insider, but I think they got a feeling about this, similar to what I heard around 2015. And that was before Clemson had really done anything major. I remember being at the clinic up in Greenville as like a high school coach, Glenn Numbers, and hearing some of the guys, well, if we see so-and-so in the playoffs, I mean, they were talking about playoffs prior to the 2015 season.
Wow.
My eyebrow going up, being like, oh, okay. Because we had a whole new defense, right? We had Sean and all that, but we had to replace pretty much the whole defense from the year before, but they knew what they had. And they were right. That team was really good. That team should have won it. I mean, that team should have won it.
Yeah, it does. It does have a little bit of that Chad Morris feel. So let's see in game one if it can kind of start to come to fruition. Hey, thanks for sticking with us this whole time. We appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed this video. By the time you're watching this, we'll be getting real close to the season opener. If you haven't already subscribed, I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe. Once we hit 500, we kind of become partners with YouTube. So if you could push us over the finish line here before the season, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thanks again for watching, and go Tigers.